Well, hello, Journey of Ruth listeners. I am so excited to be sharing with you guys today an episode that has been in my heart and my mind for a very long time. But to be honest, we just had so many great guests that I didn't want to... Well, I wanted to share them with you guys. And so I kind of pushed this back, and I really feel like this is the time for it. This is it. I want to share with you guys what God did to make me, because, I mean, let's be honest, it was a make, to make me take a sabbatical, what he did in the sabbatical and what he's done now that we're on the other side of it. I did not ever think that I would do a sabbatical starting in December. And it's so funny because if you look back at our episodes in December of 2020, you'll notice that there is an episode on surrender. And that episode, even though it aired in December, I recorded it in November, and I had no idea when I recorded it just how much God was going to ask me to surrender when I recorded that episode. And it was with our guest, Kristen Hepner, and she actually wrote a book on surrender. That became the theme of probably almost the last year of my life. When God asked me to go, let me rephrase that. When I was encouraged by other people, God may have asked me, but I wasn't listening. He had to use the voice of others in my life to really get my attention, to even think about going in that direction. When it was suggested to me that things had to change, maybe a break needed to happen, my priorities were not really in the right order. It was all great stuff. I was homeschooling. I had my normal job of teaching piano and voice lessons here at my home. I was doing the podcast. A lot of my ministry positions had kind of been removed from that fall because of all of the things that were happening with my mom's health and her passing away. So that wasn't something that I had to step out of. God had already, in his grace, in his great providence, removed me from those positions. But so there's all this really good stuff going on in my life, but I am so overwhelmed all the time by everything. And I was living my life underneath the tyranny of the urgent. If you've never heard of the tyranny of the urgent, basically it means you look at the pile of stuff that you have to do on a daily basis, and the only thing that gets done is whatever's at the top of the pile. But the problem with that is that then you never, ever get to the bottom of the pile. All you're dealing with is kind of what's on the top. And so you get this like festering anxiety of the things you're not getting to because you can't even see them. They're down at the bottom of the pile. And that's how I was living my life. Many people who know me know that I'm not the most organized person. So the idea of setting a calendar, setting a schedule for our days, that was not something I was doing. And so my life was run by whatever the most urgent thing was. I was just jumping to the most pressing fire, and that's it. I also was not really finding joy in the things that were going on in my life. And I do think that part of that was still processing the grief of losing my mom. I'm sure. I don't really like to cry. I don't really like to show emotion. Do I know that emotion is good? Yes. Do I think it's good for people to show emotion? Yes. Am I working on that? Yes. Has motherhood helped me? 100%. I cry more now after having my boys than I ever did before. But you know, my MO when I'm grieving is I kind of stuff it down, and I fill my life with things that are, I don't know, that are going to take my mind off of it. And because my life was so full and I was going from one urgent fire to the next, to the next, to the next. I also wasn't giving myself time to grieve. And so there came a day where once again, I was feeling completely overwhelmed by what was going on in my life and in my home. And I was having a conversation with my husband about how I was feeling that day, how I was feeling a little overwhelmed, and he was asking some questions. It was not a heated conversation, but, he was being honest with me, trying to kind of understand where I'm coming from and allow, offer me an outside perspective. And he said to me at the very end of that conversation, he said to me, Courtney, I don't think that you've really, truly surrendered to what is going on. And this little fire burned inside of me. I was like, what? I haven't surrendered. I'm trying to do this and not like blow out your eardrums if you're listening to this through headphones. I was so upset because in my mind, I had given up all of my ministry positions to help care for family during that time. I had given up so much time on my own and really anything social that I wanted to do in order to homeschool our children because it was what was best for our family during that time. And my other time was spent working and teaching so that, I could help pay the bills. And what do you mean I haven't surrendered everything? I don't know why, but that was the end of our conversation. It wasn't like we didn't continue to have it. And I just kind of walked away, like really, really frustrated, but no less overwhelmed. I was still overwhelmed. And a couple weeks later, I had the chance to go to lunch with a friend of mine. Marion is a wonderful woman. She is farther along in life than I am. And so I purposely asked her to go to lunch because I wanted to talk to her about these feelings that I was having about being so overwhelmed and ask if she might have some wisdom or some suggestions for me. Guys, this is what discipleship is about. When you come to moments like this where you feel like you're drowning and you don't know where to go, to know securely that you are not on your own. I knew in that moment that I could ask for help. Am I good at asking for help? No, I'm not. Did I know I needed help in some way? Yes. So I broke out of my comfort zone and I asked Marion to go to lunch with me. And I sat down and she knew she knew that I just lost my mom and she knew that I was homeschooling. And so we eat our lunch, our sandwich and our salad. And then we're kind of done. And I said, okay, I have to admit, this isn't just a social lunch. I wanted to ask you, I wanted to know, do you think that I need counseling? And she was like, oh, this should be good. Because I start out with that question. And I was like, okay, Kate, let me explain. Let me give you some of the details of what's going on in my heart, my mind, and my life. And I need you to tell me if I need to go get counseling or what I need to do because I am kind of at a loss. And so I explained everything and she said, okay, let me give you a suggestion. All of these things are so good, the things that you're doing in your life and that you're filling your time with. And then, of course, you have your two sweet cherubs. That's what you call my boys. And I'm probably not going to ever tell the story to them till they're really old, so they won't go, well, we are cherubs, Mom. But she said, you've got your two sweet cherubs that you have to take care of. And Jeff. And she said, you've got a lot on your plate. She said, I think what you should do is you should actually on a piece of paper create a metaphorical plate. And she said, I want you to write down everything that's in your life. Everything, because some of the ministry stuff that I had kind of put to the side for like the fall, I thought might come back into my life in the spring. So some of those were in my mind. There was a lot of things that I wanted to do with the podcast and with my speaking ministry that I was so excited to kick off and was like really ready to get started. And she said, I want you to lay all of those things, put them down on this plate. And she said, I also want you to make over to the side a list of things that are of top priority in my life. Remember, I said I didn't have my priorities straight. And of top priority, that would be your husband. That would be your children. That would be your home and what you need to do to take care of that. And I want everything else to be set down on this plate. And she said, then Courtney, I think you need to come before God and you need to surrender everything on that plate. Don't hold anything back. Give God everything, including your marriage and your children, to God. Well, she's a really wise lady. Of course, I told her I was a little upset with her because I said, here's the deal. Here's what you don't know. Because I didn't tell her about the conversation I had with Jeff. And I said, you have just confirmed the exact thing my husband told me to do. He said, I don't think you've surrendered. And you're telling me, Courtney, you need to surrender, which means it wasn't just Jeff talking to me in that conversation. It was the Holy Spirit speaking through Jeff. And now I had to go home and I had to apologize for my attitude. But I took her at her word. And I did. I came home. And for the next few mornings, I created my metaphorical plate. And I wrote down these actions and these relationships and these things that took up my time, took up my mind. Some of the things didn't take up a lot of time, but they took up a lot of mental space, right? Anyone who creates things knows that there's a mental toll that comes on that. And if you don't have any brain capacity, then things at home and things in your marriage and things in your parenting become harder as well. And I did find that some of those things that were on the plate, God almost immediately said, take it off. Remove that. That is no longer your responsibility. That right there, you no longer need to worry about that. Go ahead and just cross that off. You don't need to carry that anymore. And I was sad about some of those things. And then some of the things as I was continuing to pray through them, he was like, not yet. Some of these things I was so excited about starting and getting started, he was like, not yet. It's like my kids when like Christmas morning and they come out and they see those presents and they're so excited. And you say, not yet. They're like, oh, Mom. Some of these things I was literally like, oh, God, really? I was so excited about it. And he's like, not yet. And some of those things he said, take it away just for a time. This needs to go away just for a time. And one of those things was the podcast. And I just told you that I don't like to cry. But I would be lying if I didn't tell you that I shed tears when I made that decision. The ministry that the podcast provides, the opportunities are a huge blessing, And so I love everything that we get to do for the podcast, but I knew in that moment, I knew that I had to just be okay with letting it go for a time. And I didn't even know how long. I just kind of said until May to give myself some time, and then we would kind of reassess in May. Well, let me tell you that the next 6 months, in releasing some of these things, in waiting on some of these things, and focusing in on the others, it provided me with a lot less stress. It gave me a peace in the areas where I still had to do, all of the things that he continued to allow me to do, those things, I could have peace while I was performing those things, whether it's like cleaning the house or hanging out with my kids, homeschooling. It's a hard one. But I knew that was the priority in our home at that point in time. I knew that was something that God wanted me to be faithful with. It gave me more time with my family, and it gave me an awareness of how everything that needs to be done in my life, if I have my priorities straight, and if I have a schedule, that's a new thing in my life. I'm still not great at it, and I kind of go back and forth, to be honest. But if I am doing only what God has asked me to do, it will not overwhelm me. And that was a really peaceful 5 months. And then we get to May, and it's like, okay, now what do we do? What of these things do we pick up? What needs to stay on the plate? What do we need to pick up? And wouldn't you know, I jumped right back into my old habits. Well, we have to get all this stuff done ready for the podcast, and there's a lot to kick off, and we're going to add YouTube, and so therefore we're going to need to get some things to actually help with video production, and we're going to do a redesign of the podcast, or not the podcast, the website. We're going to do a redesign of the Patreon page. I want to get more up on the socials, like quotes, and I want to design different colors and different color schemes. Anyone seeing more like just heap on that plate that I just cleared off? Now, I'm not saying that any of those things are bad things, but it didn't take me getting in over my head before I realized what I was doing, and I slammed on the brakes. We just spent the last 6 months reconnecting as a family, finding more time together. And now you're going to jump right back in and fill every single moment of your time? Doesn't make any sense at all. Yes, relaunching a podcast takes a lot of time. But what does it look like to be really purposeful with that time so that it's not overwhelming you? What does it look like to take your business and put it in its right place in your life so that your marriage, your kids, your home are not being left in the dust of whatever chaos your job creates? That's the lesson I just learned. What is it like to surrender to the life the Lord has given you? The blessing of your marriage and your kids. And to steward that well while doing your job, while serving in whatever positions He's put you in. These are the things that I had learned what good looked like. I had learned what peace looked like, and I had learned what rest looked like. And then I jumped right back into work, and then I had to learn how the two came together. So during sabbatical, and as I've okay, so now we're 3 months back into the podcast. We are 10 months away from the beginning of the sabbatical. And I'm looking back going, what did I learn? What are the things that I need to remember? And maybe you listeners, maybe you can learn these alongside me. Maybe this will encourage you, because not everyone can take that sabbatical, but it doesn't mean that everyone doesn't need that rest. Everyone needs rest. And our culture tells us you don't have time for rest. And that's what I was telling myself. I don't have time. I don't have time for this. I don't have time for rest. So maybe some of the lessons that the Lord was able to teach me can encourage you. And the overarching theme was surrender. You have to surrender everything that He has given you. And you have to put it into the order that He has created. And America would tell us that, our achievements and our job are up here, but it's not. It's not. God is up here. Then our spouse and our children. Everything else falls below that. So can we surrender to where God has put us? Can we surrender to the gifts that He's given us? Can we surrender to the order that He has placed on this earth? And I honestly think that so I learned 3 things. The first thing was that surrender is all or nothing. It's all or nothing. In fact, the definition actually says it is to abandon oneself entirely to a powerful emotion or influence. So I'm going to put that in God terms, abandon oneself entirely to Christ. I have a lot of dreams and a lot of plans and a lot of things that I can do, and here we go, and woo! But is it about me, or is it about what God wants in my life? Am I abandoning everything about what I want to be who God has created me to be? Lesson 2 was that we should not move or start until God tells us to. And man, I get lots of ideas. Sometimes I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there. And that's where it helps to have my husband, because he can kind of see some of the next steps. He's an idea person too. So, 2 idea people in one house. Lots of ideas flowing. But we should not step into or step out in a direction unless we know that that is the direction God gave us. Now, I want to give a biblical example of this, and then I want to give a little caveat. The biblical example is that when the Israelites were in the desert, and we see this in Numbers chapter 9, when they were in the desert, God placed a pillar of a cloud. Yeah, a cloud in front of them. And during the day, you would see it was a cloud. And then at night, it would be a pillar of fire so that they could see it in the darkness of the night. And the people did not move unless that pillar was gone. Now I'm beginning to wonder if I was wrong about the fire. Different part. Anyway, well, my biblical scholars looked that up. Anyway, there was a cloud. There we go. A cloud that rested on the tabernacle. Here it is. Rested on the tabernacle. And as long as the cloud rested on the tabernacle, it meant the presence of God was there. And they were supposed to stay. As soon as that cloud lifted, it meant go. It's time for you to move on. That could have been in the middle of the night. If the cloud moved, they were supposed to move as well. If the cloud was resting, they were to stay. They were not supposed to move on without the presence of the Lord. And I want to encourage you to think about that. Part of the reason why I was so overwhelmed is because I was trying to move on without the presence of the Lord, and I was trying to do everything. Can I do everything? Sure. Did I have the gifts to serve in all of those capacities? Sure. Was it too much for a 24-hour day? Yes. And I recently heard a quote by Peter Scazzero. He wrote Emotionally Healthy Discipleship. And he said, don't make the mistake of doing more than what God has asked you to do. And so that takes me to my next point. So we've got, it's all or nothing. There's no halfway surrender to God. It's all or nothing. You don't move or you don't start until God tells you to go. And then it is possible to do too much of a good thing. Don't make the mistake of doing more than what God has asked you to do. And that quote right there, I think we could probably like plaster on every billboard in America for people to see. Hopefully, people are moving in the direction that God has asked them to. Hopefully, they haven't gotten stuck like, well, I don't really know. I don't really know if I'm supposed to move yet. If the Lord has told you to go, go. But then I think once we go, we start picking up these things along the side. It makes me think of grocery shopping. As you're walking down the aisles, are you a list person and you only get what's on the list? Some people say that online grocery shopping is perfect for that because then you don't get extra stuff. You only get the stuff that's on your list. Or are you one of those people that walks through the aisles like, oh yeah, that. Oh, I wonder if we need more of that. Yeah, we could always use more. Oh, that looks yummy. And you're throwing in all of this extra stuff into your cart. And then you get up to the checkout and you're like, ooh, it's a lot more than I planned on spending. It is possible to have too much of a good thing. It is possible to add too many things on your calendar into your life and end up feeling overwhelmed. And in this message, this talk by Peter Scazzero, where he mentioned that, he said, here's the thing. If you do less, you will bear more fruit. Because doing too much, it leads to exhaustion and burnout. And we are a culture of exhaustion and burnout. Like, you know, people are tired of working 60, 80-hour weeks. And people are tired of giving so much and not getting anything in return. If we're trying to do too much of a good thing, you're going to be burnt out. You're going to get exhausted. And it may seem counterintuitive in today's world to think that doing less will result in more. But it will. And the more will be much more fruitful. John 15:4-5, it says, abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, it is that bears much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. I look at that and I'm like, okay, yeah. We can't bear fruit if we are apart from him. But sometimes we're doing so much for him and no fruit is being bared and we can't figure out why. It's because we're too dang busy. And that's where I was. I was just too busy and I couldn't be a good mom and I couldn't be a good wife and I couldn't be a good podcaster and I couldn't be a good teacher. I couldn't be a good friend. I didn't have time for anyone or anything. And I certainly couldn't be a good daughter of Christ because I didn't have time for God because I was doing all of these things for him. I had to learn, and I'm still learning, not to charge out in front of God. Even now, there is this thing that's coming, I hope. I've already recorded videos. I've already written stuff for it. Actually, there's two projects that are here. They're right here, and they're right here in my heart. They're in my head. They're in my heart. And I just can't right now because I have other priorities. And I have to remember where my priorities need to be. It's so easy to think, okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. It's not about going. It's about being effective where God has placed you. And right now, God has blessed me with this podcast, with this ability to share with you guys what he is teaching me and to share with you guys the people that God has placed in my life. I've met some really, really cool people in the last few years, and some of them are slated to come on the podcast here in the next couple months, and I can't wait. I need to do that well before we jump into other projects. I believe he has really big plans for the journey of Ruth and really big plans for myself and my family, but I don't want to make the mistake of moving until he's ready. Believe me, some of those projects are ready whenever he's, when I feel like there's time. But right now, just thinking about starting some of those is like, oh my gosh. I will admit that one of the things that I think is really beneficial is having friends or a husband or a child in your life that you can bounce some of these things off of, because I also am sometimes so afraid to move. And so like starting this podcast, it would have started 6 months later than it actually did. I was like, oh yeah, January 2020. And my husband was like, August 12th, 2019. I was like, that's like in 6 weeks. He's like, you'll be fine. Get going. So sometimes you need people to kick you in the butt. But the funny thing too is that like, as I was speaking with him about these other projects and I was like, hey, I think this needs to go on the back burner and I think it needs to wait. He goes, I think that's wise. So having those people in your life, discipleship. There we are, right back to it, right? Having those people in your life that you can be open with and say, here's where I'm at, here's what I'd like to do, and here's what I'm thinking. Does that seem right to you? Does that seem plausible to you or no? Can be really beneficial. It all kind of went around the verse that God gave me for 2021. I've never had a verse of the year or a word of the year. Do you guys pick those? I've never had that. And the Lord actually gave me one for 2021. I was doing the She Reads Truth Advent devotionals last year, and they had Micah 7:7 as a part of it. And the verse says, but as for me, I will I will watch expectantly for my Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation, the God who hears me. And what I felt was like 2021 was going to be the year that we were going to see God fulfill plans that had been promised and not met yet. We were going to see God do great things in 2021. I don't know that the great things that I thought were going to happen have happened to anything like what I thought they were going to do. But have we seen him do great things in 2021? Yes. Yes, we have. When I look at the rest of that Micah verse, yes, with the God who hears me, but then the next verses say, do not rejoice over me, O my enemies, though I fall, I will rise. Though I dwell in darkness, the Lord is a light for me. And as I continue to read these verses, I'm like, gosh, Micah 7 is a beautiful passage for all of us. Like in the world right now, because it's so much about how the world is dark. But where do we turn for light? To God. My world felt so overwhelming. And God was like, that's because you're not you're doing really good things, but you're not coming to me. You're not leaving any space for me. You're not leaving any space for your family. Your body and your heart and your mind know it's wrong. So it knows that it should be unhappy, but things seem to be fine. It was a mess. But Micah 7 is a beautiful picture of like, man, when things are dark, where do we find our light? We find it in Christ. It says, I will bear the indignation of the Lord because I have sinned against him until he pleads my case and executes justice for me. He will bring me out into the light and I will see his righteousness. God gave me this verse before I even knew I was going to go on sabbatical. And I didn't realize all the work that the Lord was going to do in my heart and in my home in the next 6 months, 8 months. But I am still watching expectantly for the Lord because he's already done so much in 2021. I am not the same person sitting here as I was in January. Do I still make mistakes? Yes. Do I still fill every corner of my schedule? Sure. But even my mindset is better. On Monday, I had a podcast to edit and I was ready to buckle down. And my husband called and said, I need you to come and help me. There's a time in my life when I would have been so entirely frustrated, maybe even told him no because I had important things to do. And instead I said, okay, I'm around the corner. I'll come help. And guess what? I got free breakfast out of it. But more importantly than free breakfast, I got breakfast alone with my husband because my kids were in school. And I know I would have missed out on that breakfast 10 months ago. So the Lord has done a lot for me. The Lord has done a lot in this podcast. He has done a lot in our home. And my prayer is that you guys might be encouraged to surrender. If you're holding on to something and you're holding on to a job, you're holding on to grief, you're literally holding on for dear life. That's where I was. I was holding on for dear life because there is no way that I'm going to be able to get everything done and get everyone fed and get everything, get everyone taught. And there's no time for me after that. If that's you, if you are just so frantic, constantly subjected to the tyranny of the urgent and unable to find peace in your life, can I encourage you to come before the Lord, even when you feel like you've surrendered it all, because there's nothing left for you. How have you not surrendered it all? That's me. That's where I was at. I've surrendered it all. But the truth is I hadn't. I'd heaped my plate with things that I wasn't doing in joy. And so to me, that's what surrender looked like in my life, was that, in a very martyristic mood. Well, I'm just doing everything for other people. That's not surrender. Sometimes it's survival. But surrender looks like, God, what do these things need to go away? And it's going to feel like they can't, because I know I was like, some of these things can't go away. Guess what? They did. And it's fine. Do not rejoice over me, O my enemy, for though I fall, I will rise. Though I dwell in darkness, the Lord is a light for me. Cling to those words. cling to them. Now, at the end of every episode, we ask, who is it in your life that has helped you along in your journey? Well, I just told you about a 10-month journey. So you know that there's people that have helped me along, a lot of people. But let me say, first of all, Jeff and Marion, thank you for encouraging me to surrender. Both of you speaking truth into my life that I did not want to hear. Sorry. Thank you for that. And then I have my friends Leanne and Kim, who sat down with me right before I restarted the journey of Ruth. And I told them some of my ideas. And instead of saying, oh, that's a really good idea, that's great, instead they asked really hard questions. And I asked myself, why did I invite you to dinner again? Why do I put these people in my life that like call me out and ask me these really hard questions? Oh, that's right, because it's really good for me. It's good for you too. Find those people that are going to ask you the hard questions. And some of what drives the journey of Ruth is because they helped me figure out what it was that was supposed to be driving the journey of Ruth. And finally, listeners. You guys not even knowing the whole story have been so affirming in what God has taught me in the last 10 months. You guys have seen online sometimes I've been late to post or, not been on social media for like a week at a time, whatever it might be. And I will come on and say, hey guys, so sorry I posted it late. I had this going on with my kids or my marriage. And you guys do not miss a beat to say, you made the right choice. And you guys don't even you didn't even know that this was what was going on in my mind, that to say yes to whatever it was and to say no to the podcast and to know it was going to come out late was really hard for me because I love you guys as the listeners and I want to honor you guys by keeping, with the schedules and getting you guys information. But you guys have been so affirming and saying, Courtney, you made the right choice. Well done. Good job. So can I say thank you to you guys as listeners, and the fact that some of you guys have just stuck around and you continue to listen to the replays, and you were right there week 1 in August when we launched again and saying, hey, great job. So thank you, listeners. Your sweet messages, your encouragements, they really mean a lot. They really do. I pray today that you will come to a point where you can see God's righteousness, where you can maybe with your hands open surrender the things that you're holding on to tightly in your life, and that you will see Him provide light in a dark place in your life, that you too, along with me, will wait expectantly to see what He's going to do and wait expectantly for His return.